Why didn't you say anything until now?" My voice was trembling. My best friend Matilda, who I thought I could proudly say I'd shared 13 years of friendship with, couldn't look me in the eye. The stack of papers laid out on the kitchen table in her apartment was shaking the very foundation of my life. My name is Elsa Lee. I'm 35 years old and work as an accountant in Chicago. My father passed away from a heart attack 15 years ago, and about a year later, my mother remarried Edwin Lewis. Edwin was a colleague of my father's and had been a great support to both my mother and me during a difficult time. At least, that's what I had believed until today. "I thought I was doing it for you, Elsa," Matilda finally spoke. "But recently, I heard Edwin got involved in an investment scam. I couldn't stay silent any longer." The documents in front of me were records of the trust fund my father had left behind. It was supposed to have been given to me when I turned 21. $1.2 million. But my stepfather, Edwin, had managed it without ever telling me it existed for 14 years. What shocked me even more was the power of attorney document with my forged signature. It was dated just after I turned 18. Back then, I was desperately preparing for college, and I believed everything Edwin and my mother told me. "How did you find out?" I asked, lifting the papers with trembling hands. "You know, my mother used to work at a law firm," Matilda explained quietly. She noticed some of Edwin's fraudulent documents a few years ago, but he pressured her into silence. Before she passed away last month, she gave me this evidence. Matilda's mother, Natalie, was someone I had known as well. When she passed away suddenly from cancer, it had been a heavy blow to Matilda. And now, her death had brought a new truth to light. The room began to spin. In my head, the memories of the past 15 years started to rearrange like pieces of a puzzle. "Apply for scholarships, Elsa. You have to work hard if you want to achieve anything in life." I could clearly recall Edwin's words when I was preparing for college. Back then, I was juggling 3 part-time jobs and desperately searching for scholarships. In the mornings, I prepared the cafe for opening. During the day, I worked in the university library office. At night, I was a waitress at a restaurant. On weekdays, I worked 16 hours a day. Even on weekends, I didn't rest. I always slept less than 5 hours a night. All of it was so I could attend college and to help the household finances. Over and over again, I endured, even when I felt I might collapse. I believed in Edwin's lesson about the importance of succeeding on your own. Meanwhile, he and my mother had bought a new luxury SUV that same year and spent weekends at upscale golf courses. I never questioned it back then. I believed they've worked hard for many years, so they have the right to enjoy it. Keep the wedding modest. Luxury will be your downfall. That was Edwin's advice when I married Thomas 3 years ago. We held a small ceremony and kept our honeymoon modest. Thomas and I did all the preparations ourselves and had help from our friends. All of it was to avoid burdening the family. Right after the wedding, Edwin and my mother went on a European cruise. It was a special deal, just happened to be good timing, they said. Family is about supporting each other, Elsa. Someday when you need help, we'll be there for you. Last year, Edwin and my mother spoke to me about their anxieties about old age and asked for help in buying a new home. I gave them $50,000 from my savings, money I had slowly saved up through my work as an accountant. Thomas and I had to postpone buying our own house. I should have told you earlier, Matilda said with tears in her eyes. But I was scared of their threats. The truth is sometimes cruel. But what lay before me now wasn't just betrayal, it was calculated exploitation. Everything began to take on new meaning. When I chose to major in accounting in college, Edwin said, "It's great to have an accountant in the family." Looking back, he probably just wanted to reduce the chance of uncovering his fraud. That night, when I returned home, Thomas immediately noticed the look on my face. "What happened?" he asked with concern. After I finished telling him everything, his expression hardened with anger. "You have to sue him," he said without hesitation. "He stole from you. While you were juggling 3 part-time jobs to pay for school, he was living a luxurious life on your inheritance. But he raised me. He helped us after my father died," I protested weakly. "Raised you?" Thomas said in disbelief. "He stole your father's legacy, lived in luxury on your money, and lectured you about frugality while you were working yourself to exhaustion." His words were painfully true. But I still wasn't ready to accept such a deep betrayal. And the most painful part was the possibility that my mother might have been his accomplice. "I'll talk to a lawyer tomorrow," I decided. "But I still don't know if I'll sue." That night, I couldn't sleep. The next morning, I went to a law office. Through Matilda's referral, a sharp-eyed lawyer named Joyce Long took on my case. "This is a clear breach of fiduciary duty," Joyce said while reviewing the documents. "A forged signature, hidden assets, and false declarations. All of these could be grounds for criminal charges." "Criminal charges?" The words felt heavy. "Does that mean prison?" "There is a possibility," Joyce answered candidly. "At the very least, for financial fraud and forgery." My heart pounded violently. The thought of Edwin going to prison made my chest tighten. His crimes were unforgivable, but he had supported us during hard times and had become a father figure to me. And more than anything, I was worried about the impact on my mother. She seemed to love Edwin very much. "Is there any other option?" "A civil resolution," Joyce said quietly. "Demanding the return of the remaining trust funds and repayment of the misused assets." Joyce began to ask for more details about my situation. The hardships during college, balancing multiple part-time jobs while studying, and constantly being taught the importance of independence. "Elsa," Joyce said, looking up from the documents, "do you have records of all the tuition, housing, and living expenses you paid?" "I think I have most of them," I replied. "I kept detailed records of all my income and expenses for scholarship applications." "That's excellent," Joyce said. "Showing how much you paid and how hard you worked will make Edwin's deception even clearer. Despite the fact that you had assets, he forced you into excessive labor." I thought back to my records from college. My daily planner was filled with class schedules and work shifts. There were times I took naps in my car just to get 2 or 3 hours of sleep a week. Even when I was hospitalized from exhaustion, Edwin simply said, "This is part of life's education." By the time I left the office, I had made a decision. First, I would confront Edwin directly. Then, I would decide on my final course of action based on his response. And above all, I had to confirm the thing I feared most. Did my mother know? The next evening, Thomas and I visited Edwin and my mother's luxurious suburban home. "Are you ready?" Thomas asked as he parked the car. "No," I answered honestly. "But the longer we wait, the worse it gets." When I knocked on the door, my mother answered. Her warm smile tore at my heart even more. "Elsa, Thomas, what a surprise. Is there a special reason for the visit?" "We need to talk," I said as calmly as I could. "Is Edwin home?" We were led into the living room, where Edwin was working on his laptop. He stood up to greet us. Always calm, always calculating. The man who supported my mother after my father's death, encouraged me, and now my life's greatest betrayer. "Elsa, Thomas," Edwin said with a smile. "Is something wrong?" "Something wrong?" My voice trembled slightly. "Yes, something's very wrong." I slowly took the documents out of my bag and spread them across the coffee table. "Can you explain this?" The moment he saw the papers, the color drained from Edwin's face. He glanced at my mother, then looked back at the documents. "Where did you?" "That's not important," I interrupted. "Why? Why did you hide it from me? Why did you keep using my money?" "Elsa, calm down," my mother interjected. "What are you talking about?" Seeing the confusion on her face gave me a sliver of hope. Maybe she really didn't know. "Edwin hid Dad's trust fund from me," I explained. $1.2 million, Mom. Money I was supposed to receive when I turned 21. Instead, he forged my signature and used it for 14 years. I continued. And I went through college working 3 part-time jobs. There were times I collapsed from exhaustion. "I thought you were teaching me independence," my voice trembled. "Meanwhile, you were playing golf and going on cruises using my money." My mother's face turned pale. She looked at Edwin, then back at me. That must be a mistake. Edwin wouldn't do something like that." "It's not a mistake," I said, my voice shaking. "I have all the evidence. A legal professional has reviewed everything." Edwin let out a deep sigh. "Elsa, listen," he said, his voice low and controlled. "Your father left me with a lot of responsibility. That included taking care of you and your mother. The trust fund, it's complicated." "Complicated?" Thomas said coldly. "Is fraud and theft complicated? While Elsa was working over 16 hours a day and breaking down from exhaustion to pay for school?" "We were just saving it for your future," Edwin defended. "You were too young to handle that kind of money at the time." "Oh, really?" I exploded in anger. "So while I was cutting back on sleep to keep working, you were buying new cars? While I had a modest wedding, you were off on a cruise?" My mother started to cry. "Elsa, we never meant for this to happen. I didn't know." "Don't lie, Grace," Edwin suddenly said in a cold voice. "You benefited just as much." Those words shattered my last hope. My mother had known. "There are 2 options," I said as I stood up. "First, full repayment of the remaining trust fund and all misused funds. Second, criminal prosecution." "This is blackmail," Edwin shouted. "No, this is reality," Thomas said quietly. "This is the consequence of what you did to Elsa." While she worked herself sick to pay for school, you lived in luxury on her account. You have 48 hours to decide, I said. If I don't hear from you by then, I'll pursue legal action. As we stepped outside, rain began to fall. It felt as though the sky mirrored my emotions. She knew, I sobbed in the car. Mom knew, she betrayed me too. Elsa, Thomas held me close. You're strong. You can get through this. He took my hand. They exploited you for years. They worked you until you collapsed. They stole every part of the legacy your father left you. But now it's time to end it. You're right, I said, wiping my tears. No one will ever exploit me again. On the way home, my phone rang. My mother's name appeared on the screen. I didn't answer. I wasn't ready to talk to her. That night, I listened to her voicemail. Elsa, please let me talk to you. At first, I didn't know. I thought Edwin was saving that money for you. I didn't learn the truth until years later, and, by then... Her voice broke. Please call me back. I ended the call. I loved my mother, and I knew she loved me too. But that love was now buried beneath betrayal. Images of myself in college came rushing back. Exhausted, collapsed from malnutrition and sleep deprivation, lying in a hospital bed. Still worried about my next shift. Was it all for nothing? Was it all a performance for the people who were stealing from me? I lay on my bed and stared at the ceiling. Tonight, like so many nights before, I knew I wouldn't sleep. But this time, it wasn't from exhaustion, it was from the pain of betrayal. 48 hours passed, but there was no word from Edwin. So as I began preparing to go to court, I received an unexpected visitor. My mother's sister, Aunt Liz. Elsa, we need to talk, she said with a grave expression. It's about Edwin. Unlike my mother, Lisa had always been honest and straightforward. She pulled an old envelope from her bag. This was entrusted to me by your father, Liz said. He told me, if anything happens, give this to Elsa. Inside the envelope were a handwritten letter from my father and a copy of the trust fund documents. My father had given clear instructions that the money be given to me when I turned 21. And he had warned not to place complete trust in Edwin. Why didn't you say anything until now? I asked, holding the letter with trembling hands. Your father made me promise, Liz explained. Unless something goes wrong, never speak of this envelope to anyone. Last week, Edwin called me about you. He's been spreading bad rumors about you to the relatives. When I heard that, I knew it was time to give this to you. With this new evidence, we began preparing to go to court. But the day before the filing, Joyce contacted us. There's been a settlement offer. What? Edwin's lawyer reached out. He agrees to return the remaining trust funds and repay 70% of the misused money within 3 years. Why the sudden change? Probably because he found out you have your father's letter, Joyce explained. That letter is damning evidence for him. Should I accept it? I think so, Joyce said. Trials are long and emotionally draining. This settlement is fair, and it allows you to move forward. There's one condition, I said with firm resolve. He must explain the truth to his friends. He must correct the lies he told and the damage he did to my image in writing. On the day of the signing, Edwin came to the law office. He appeared calm, but the tension in his eyes was unmistakable. "Elsa," he said in a hushed voice. "Can we talk? Just the two of us?" I looked at Joyce. She gave a small nod. In the adjacent conference room, Edwin stood by the window, staring outside. "Why?" I asked bluntly. "Why did you use me like that?" "I didn't plan it from the beginning." He turned around slowly. "When your father passed away, I only wanted to help you and Grace. But then I learned about the trust fund. And I gave in to temptation," he shrugged. "At first, I thought it would be temporary. I meant to borrow just a little and pay it back later. But as time passed—" 14 years? I said in disbelief. "You lied for 14 years? It became a habit," he said in a tired voice. "And I couldn't stop. There was also fear that you'd become such a good accountant, you'd discover the truth someday." "What about my mother?" "She didn't know at first," Edwin admitted. "But a few years later, she started asking questions. By that time, we had already spent most of the money. She made a choice." His words pierced my heart. My mother had made a choice. And she chose Edwin, not me. Before I left the room, I turned back. "You weren't my father. But I'll never forget that you were there for us during a difficult time. That part was real." After I signed the papers and stepped out of the office, the rain had stopped. A rainbow stretched across the sky, light breaking through the darkness. "It's over now," Thomas said, holding my hand. "No," I smiled. "This is a new beginning." A week after the settlement, my mother came to visit my apartment. She looked exhausted, her usual confident presence gone. "May I come in?" she asked hesitantly. I led her into the living room. The silence between us was heavy with years of trust and secrets. "Why?" I finally asked. "Why did you stay silent?" "At first, I really didn't know," my mother began softly. "Edwin was the one who saved us after your father died. When he didn't mention the trust fund, I didn't question it. And years later, when I realized the truth—" "By then it was already too late," I said bitterly. "I'm not trying to make excuses," my mother said, tears welling in her eyes. "I was weak. I depended too much on my love for Edwin and the stability he provided. And as time went on, it became harder and harder to tell the truth." "You knew," I said. "When I was struggling in college, when I was saving for my wedding. You knew." My mother nodded silently. "I know it's unforgivable." "What will happen with Edwin?" I asked, staring out the window. "We're separated," my mother said. "After the settlement, he changed. He's torn between anger and regret. He says he still loves you, but at the same time, he tries to justify what he did." I gave a bitter smile. "Typical." "Elsa," my mother tried to take my hand. I pulled away slightly. "Is there any way we can rebuild our relationship?" "It'll take time," I answered honestly. "Once trust is broken, it's hard to get it back." "I'll wait," she said. "No matter how long it takes." After she left, I looked through my father's old photo album. Familiar smiles, family vacations, and moments I had nearly forgotten. As I turned the pages, I came across a photo I hadn't noticed before. It was of my father, a younger Grace, and a group of their friends. Among them was Edwin. They were all young and full of hope. As I stared at the photo, my Aunt Liz called. "Elsa, I'm thinking of gathering some of your father's old friends," she said. "They really want to see you." After my father's death, I had lost touch with most of these people. Edwin had skillfully drawn us into his own circle and gradually distanced us from my father's network. "That sounds nice," I replied. For the first time in a while, I felt a sense of lightness. The following Saturday, Liz hosted a small gathering at her home. There were my father's old friends and colleagues, and people who had known both my parents since their university days. They welcomed me warmly and filled the room with memories of my father. "Your father was an incredible man," said Gail Miller, an old colleague of his. "He always talked about you. He used to say, 'Elsa is something special.' After he passed away, we tried to reach out to you," another friend added. "But Edwin told us Elsa and Grace need to start a new life, and kept us away." The pieces of the puzzle began to fit together. Edwin had deliberately cut me off from my father's memories and connections, drawing me under his own influence. "But now, you've come back," Gail Miller said with a smile. "And we have a lot to talk about." At the end of the gathering, Gail approached me. "This is something your father entrusted to me," he said, handing me a small box. He told me, "When Elsa grows up, please give this to her." Inside the box was my father's pocket watch and a small notebook. The notebook was filled with his thoughts, hopes, and love for me. I never knew he had kept a journal. "He was so proud of you," Gail said quietly. "And if he saw how you've risen now, he'd be even prouder." On the way home, I cried in the car. Not just from the pain of loss and betrayal, but from the release that came with newly discovered connections and understanding. The next day, Thomas and I were walking through a park. The autumn wind passed through the trees, and colorful leaves danced around us. "What do you think?" Thomas asked. "About yesterday's gathering?" "It felt like finding a lost family," I replied. "Through them, I feel like I got to know my father better." "And your mother?" "It'll take time," I sighed. "She made the wrong choice. But I'm not ready to throw away our entire relationship. At least not yet." Thomas took my hand. "Whatever you decide, I'll be here with you." I was grateful for those words. Amid all the chaos and betrayal, Thomas's love and support had been my anchor. 1 year after the settlement, I stood at my father's grave on a quiet winter morning. Snow was gently falling, covering the headstone in a white blanket. Beside me stood Aunt Liz, her warm hand resting on my shoulder. "He would be proud of who you are today," Aunt Liz said softly. My life had changed completely over the past year. With the recovered trust fund and repayment from my stepfather, I had opened my own accounting firm, a dream I'd had since childhood. It was small, but it embodied my personal vision. My specialty was family trusts and estate planning, a natural choice born from my own experience. "Do you think so?" I asked. "Sometimes I wonder if I did the right thing." He supported us during hard times, after all. Edwin had complied with the settlement. He sold the luxurious house and moved into a more modest home. He remained separated from my mother, and their marriage seemed to be nearing its end. Your father was always a man who valued justice and fairness, Aunt Liz said, taking my hand. Choosing not to send Edwin to prison was an act of mercy, but holding him accountable was the right thing to do. The biggest change wasn't financial, it was internal. My understanding of trust, values, and family had fundamentally shifted. As my therapist Marcus once said, I now had the skill of setting boundaries, a concept that had once been foreign to me, but had since become central to my everyday life. But the most precious change of all was the new connections I had formed with those who had been part of my father's life. Your father was my mentor, said the gray-haired man, Gail Miller. He always said, integrity is the foundation of everything. And he always carried family photos, another woman added. Especially yours. He was always so proud of you. The process of rebuilding my relationship with my mother had begun slowly. At first, short phone calls. Then a tense lunch. Gradually, we were beginning to form a new kind of relationship. It was hard to understand her choices with Edwin. But I had to acknowledge that she was now trying to make amends. Your father was such a kind man, she said one day, flipping through a shared photo album. Even during hard times, he never gave up hope. Why were he and Edwin friends? I asked a question I had always wondered. They seemed so different. They were different when they were young, my mother explained. Edwin was ambitious, but he was honest. After your father got sick, he changed. His desire for power and control grew stronger. And yet you chose him? I said quietly. The greatest mistake of my life, my mother sighed. But I won't run from that mistake. I'll do whatever it takes to rebuild my relationship with you, she said. Finally, Gail came up to me. He pulled a small envelope from his coat pocket. This is something your father gave me, he said quietly. He told me, one day she might need it. And I think that day is now. Inside the envelope was an old photograph and a short letter. The photo showed my parents and a young me. The letter was in my father's handwriting. To Elsa, life is often unfair, and it doesn't always go as we plan. But never forget you are strong, you are wise, and most of all, you are loved. No matter how winding the path may be, if you stay true to yourself, you will always find your way to the right place. With love, Dad. Tears streamed down my cheeks. It was as if he had foreseen the future and left these words for this very moment. Did he know? I asked Gail. About Edwin? He suspected, Gail replied quietly. That's why he put several safeguards in place. He gave copies of the trust documents to a few people and left this letter. He was a cautious man. On the way home that day, I held my father's final message close to my heart and read it again and again. No matter how winding the path may be, if you stay true to yourself, you will always find your way to the right place. He wasn't wrong.